Hello everyone, it's Mrs. Farmer here. Today we're going to be talking about Egypt. So on your Cornell Notes page, go ahead and write Egypt as the topic, and underneath that put Chapter 4, Section 1, Cornell Notes. Okay, about 10 more seconds to get that down. Okay, and on to our essential question. Okay, for today, our essential question is, how did the Nile River help the development of Egypt? How did the Nile River help the development of Egypt? Go ahead and write that down for your essential question. Okay, about 15 more seconds. Okay, and we are moving on. Okay, on this slide, I just want to talk about some things that you see in these pictures. This is an Egypt overview. I'll start right here with this hand. This right here is called silt. So what you had is you had the Great Nile River right here, and it was higher ground up here, and then it went downhill into, this is the Mediterranean Sea out here where it eventually flowed down into. But down here where you see this delta, you can see a lot of green because it was very damp, and the river would flood and it would leave really great, rich soil. In fact, the soil was so rich, sometimes they would do what's called double cropping. So they would have two different crops on the same land growing at the same time. Now, if you look here, you can see everywhere near the Nile is very green and moist, but if you go very much further outside of there, you're going to end up in this desert. So the only farming going on was very close to the Nile. Also, you're going to notice that this says Lower Egypt. Up here is Upper Egypt, again, because the land up here was higher and the Nile actually flowed that way. So it was flowing downhill. It sometimes seems counterintuitive because on the map it's going up, but actually think of elevation. This is higher and it's flowing downhill. Okay? That is where the Nile is. And this is another picture. It looks like it's some cataracts, which I'll explain a little later. And here's one more map over here of what it looked like. You had the Blue Nile and the White Nile over here in Ethiopia and in Sudan coming together to make the Nile River, flowing downhill again into the Mediterranean Sea. And then right here is a picture of Africa showing you where that is. So you didn't have to write anything there. I just wanted you to get an overview of the dates and where it was and what it looked like. Okay, so we talked a little bit about this before. If they didn't have the Nile, there would be nothing but sun-baked desert land, bright blue skies, and the dry sand of ancient Egypt. The Nile is what made them able to survive. That water made it so that the crops would grow. They wouldn't just get baked in the sun. So go ahead and take 30 seconds, 40 seconds to write that down. Okay, moving on to the next one. Okay, so right here, sorry about that, don't need that. You have, again, the White Nile and the Blue Nile. The White Nile is the main stream. It flows out of Lake Victoria in East Africa, which is over here on the map, as you can see, right there, Lake Victoria. That's the White Nile. Again, it's flowing downhill. And the Blue Nile starts over here in Ethiopia, and it rushes downhill and comes together with the White Nile, and then they come together to make the Nile. So how about 30 seconds to write down that information? So you might be wondering, so you have this great river that could be transportation. People could go up and down it. There was one problem though, and that's why the people of Egypt right here did not get to find these sources, the two lakes, is because right here, these cataracts were rocky rapids. You can see them right here. And that blocked travelers from going into the interior of Africa, and that is why the ancient people did not know the source of the Nile. They didn't know where it came from. They were just grateful. You can feel free to put a star next to cataracts because it may be on the test.